Hi FlossTube. This is a little video interjected in with my other videos here on my FlossTube channel called Lori Wilson. I'm threadmilkdesign. I've had requests to show you and demonstrate how I stuff little pillows, finishes, dough bowl pillows, you know, ornaments, you name it, with sawdust. So here's a couple of things, first of all, that I learned from my sawdust guy. Two things, well, one thing in particular you've got to remember is if you go get sawdust from any mill, a mill is, is where they make sawdust. So they're cutting wood, making products out of wood, like furniture. The guy I go to is in Orem, Utah, and can't remember his name right now. If you email me, and I will put my email in the Dropbox below, I can give you his information. But the one thing he taught me first and foremost is it's got to be pure wood. You do not want sawdust in your home around your finishes that you're going to breathe that are chemical woods. So say like a particle board, anything that's pressed woods, pieces glued together, that they use, say, like for home finishing. Say like you're building a home, you've got a bunch of particle board that you've put up for the walls, and then is it particle board?
Or plywood.
Or plywood. Things, wood products that are glued together, because those glues and chemicals are not to be breathed or used by or in the form of human consumption. Does that make sense? So meaning it's kind of like having, we experienced this when we lived in Louisiana. We had an unfinished basement, and they hadn't plastic covered all of the fibers from the insulation. And so one of my kids developed a coughing problem. Anyway, you're not supposed to be around that stuff. It's supposed to be covered. Plywood and particle board are used behind drywall, and the drywall covers that up, and then you tape and you paint, and everything's sealed in, and it's safe. So when you go get your sawdust, look for a mill woodworker who does pure wood sawdust. There's a lot of people who do wood work, but they accumulate both the plywood and the pure wood in one building or one vacuum bag. So find a guy who does just pure wood, and he is usually, all of them are more than happy to give it to you because they don't want it. They're not doing anything with it. They might use small portions of it to make filler for holes. I've seen some woodworkers do that. They kind of like reuse it with glue themselves, but they don't keep huge amounts of it typically. So they're very happy to get rid of it. I keep a couple bins of it in my garage, and we're talking, bins this big because I love sawdust. I have come to love it so much because what I can do with it is squish it flat, and sawdust comes in the form of dust, all the way, as small as dust particles, all the way up to like 1 or 2 inch little strips. And all of that is fine to put in together into your pillows, and I'll show you that, my example of that today. But you can squish it, form it, do whatever you want with that pillow. Okay, one little pause there. I'm going to go through my tool box for finishing real quick too. And I'm going to take one of these out so I can hear myself a little better. All right, so I have a tool basket set up here. And thank you, Chris, for filming for me today. And here's what I keep in it. I have heavy duty quilter's thread. You'll want this for finishing and sewing your opening closed. I keep a thimble. Where is that? Right here. Because the needle you're going to use is kind of heavier, and sometimes going through several layers of fabric gets a little hard on your finger. So set up yourself a little, metal thimble, rubber thimble, whatever. I like these rubber ones because I can pull on the needle and push it through without getting a very big injury or callus. I keep a little pair of scissors set up here to snip threads with. I have a needle book for my sharps. Now these are not cross stitch needles. These are sharps needles that are used for sewing. I'm going to use that one right there today. I also keep, and I love this little piece of wax that I got from a company called Posy Handmade. It's 100% beeswax. that comes in this little gem. You can see I've used it a lot, run my threads through it. It's like a gem-sized or gem-shaped piece of wax. And this is that company's name. I found her on Etsy. And there's a lot of beeswax companies or suppliers on Etsy. But this is how this came in this little metal container. And I love it. So that, of course, comes out of my finishing basket. And I'm just going to set it here so I can access it. How nice we have that lid to put it in. Like this little dish ready to go. Now I have 2 pillows here I'm going to show you today. We're only going to sew up one, but typically I will pull enough of this extra strong quilting thread off of my spool to do about 3 pillows at a time. So I'm not going to take as much off today. The reason you wax this, the reason you use the strong thread and you wax it is so it doesn't wear out and become threadbare while you're stitching through all those layers and pulling on it. You're going to pull and tug. And I just dropped my thread, so we'll try that again. Okay, so I've got about 2 feet that I'm going to start with. And I'm going to run it right through my wax. So you just lay your thread on the wax, hold it down in place, pull it through the wax, and you'll feel it get all gummed up. I usually go a couple times, both directions, so that even the very tips get some wax on them, and it's good to go. And fair warning, I'm a licker. I lick my thread, it goes through so slick. Okay, and now I'm going to do what's called a quilter's knot. Can you see close enough on this? Really zoom in.
It looks good.
Okay, so what you do is you just cross your thread over your knee like that, hold it between your 2 fingers, wrap 4 or 5 times, then hold the wraps with the other finger, push the needle through, and you've got a really nice little coiled knot down at the bottom. It's a very slick, fast way to tie a knot in your thread. Okay, so I'm going to lay that aside just for a moment. In my little needle book right there. I first and foremost want to give all credit of learning to do these from Vonna Pheiffer. Vonna has wonderful tutorials. I'm going to try to put it in the drop-down box of exactly which video to go watch her do pillow finishes. What she shows, and what I've got here today is 2 examples. You can kind of see the cross-stitch design through the fabric here. And I'm going to show you 2. One is, this is what it looks like before you trim the corners. And Vonna will tell you, and it's a great reminder, how to backstitch when you're sewing from the beginning of your opening across and stitch all the way to the end, and reverse and backstitch. Then come here, reverse and backstitch, and continue on. And do the exact same thing in all 4 corners. I usually leave an opening about, not quite 2 inches. The less you leave, the less you have to sew up. The more opening you leave, the more you have to sew up. But it all depends on your funnel that you're going to use to try to get your sawdust through, which I'll show you a cool little funnel that I found for this job. So you can see what that looks like. I always mark my beginning, where I'm starting to sew, and where I end my sewing, because you want something to tell you, not a pin. A pin won't tell you to stop, or a clip, but a mark will. So mark it. I usually use a friction pen. It's not going to matter. This all gets stuffed inside. Just mark it somehow. Okay, so can you see okay those corners? Now you might be looking at this saying, okay, what's this white stuff over the cross stitch? That is SF 101. Used to be called Stacy back in the day, like 10 or 15 years ago, but now it's a Pellon product called SF 101. I love it. It's a lightweight cotton woven interfacing that's fusible, so you can iron it on. When I do pillows with sawdust, I always use Pellon, always use this lining, because you are going to get those chunks of sawdust. It can poke through your fabric. It doesn't matter that much. It's up to you. It is a personal preference. I prefer it. So you can see right here, this is where I, those little threads, I think I forgot to do the eyeballs or something on my little girl. You're going to see here in a minute. So I did it through the Pellon, which is totally fine later after you've stitched everything else. All right, so now I'm going to show you on one of these. I'll just set this one aside. How I'm going to trim it. And this is how Vonna says to do it too. So about an inch back, I'm not showing her measurements at the moment. I should have watched her video one more time. But about an inch back, just start angling your scissors towards that intersection in the corner. If you leave about 1 to 2 inches of stitched sewing machine stitches on there, you'll be fine. And trim it back like that. And why? We're just reducing bulk so that you can turn it and make your corners look pretty decent. So I just get to there, I angle, cut, and taper it off. And you do not have to be exact on this as far as the angle goes. Just watch that corner that you don't take too much off and leave those couple of stitches, 1 to 2, 1.5. That's why you reverse in the corners so much. Just to reinforce it. So you can see that's all I've trimmed off, those little pieces. Now, Vonna, her stuff turns out perfect as far as I can tell. It's beautiful. She knows what she's doing. I did try the part of the method in her old video where she opens up these seams and presses them back. And I bet it probably leaves a cleaner finish. But you can do it with your fingernail like that. That would be called a fingernail press. And she does it with the linen too. Now linen's cool. Linen is manipulatable. You can bend it. You can press it very easily. See how well it stays flat compared to the cotton? Linen's awesome. So you can do that on all 4 sides, or you can do what I do when you're in kind of a hurry and just do it after. I'll show you how I do it after. So now I'm just pulling those corners through, and I'm putting my thumb in here and then pushing through with my other finger to try to get all that fabric through. You'll manipulate that in a moment with a chopstick. Did I forget my chopstick? I have it. I love the chopstick recommendation from Vonna. I use it all the time when I'm stuffing now. And why is it so awesome? Because, in my opinion, you've got a smaller end and a fatter end. And sometimes you're going to want the smaller or the fatter, depending on what you're doing. When you're pushing your corners out, you're going to want the smaller end. And you don't want to push too much. You will stretch the corners out. I've done it many times. But I don't just push the corner. I push around the corner. Okay, so it gives it a more fat corner look, if that makes sense. So then I'll go back over here, push the corner. This is where you might want to get really close up and watch me do another corner. There's your back. Come sit.
This should be good.
Okay. My cameraman's doing awesome. Okay, so you just got this little corner. We're just trying to manipulate it and get it out. Almost got him. But yeah, come back here and manipulate past the corner a little bit. It just, might help you. But it's your personal preference, once again. I feel like they're coming out pretty good. Okay, we're almost ready to stuff. Now, I love putting trims on mine, and so I'm not super worried about my corners, because one thing I have noticed is once you glue a trim on or sew a trim on, however fancy you want to be about it, it covers up the seam and the corners. You don't even know it's there. So see what I'm doing now is pulling out. This is where I said you can pull out and press the seam with your fingernails. So I just run my fingernails across it. And I really hope you can see this okay. Can you see it?
If you hold it real still, we can focus in on it. There we go. That looks good.
So see how this one's dipping? See the dip? Right here. You can see that there's seam in there that needs to be pulled out.
Show us the dip again.
You can see it right there too. But see, these that I've pulled out are much straighter. They look better. So you're just trying to achieve pulling the seam out. So you can see I just grab it with my fingernails, pull. And then when I see stitches, see those stitches coming through right there? You know you're done. You're done pulling, you're done flattening because they've come out. And there's how they look. And if I think one, needs a little yank on it, I yank on it. So there was a book that my sister-in-law, Stephanie, showed me when she got at the library, and it's called The Manipulation of Fabric. I have yet to go back and read it now that I know more about fabric and about linen, but I think it would be well worth your time to find it. I don't know who wrote it, but I do know it was called The Manipulation of Fabric. That would teach you what you can do with these cool natural fibers. All right, I'm happy with that. And because I'm a sawdust filler, I don't care a whole lot about the perfection of the finish. Meaning it can look natural. You're still going to look at a bowl of finishes that I have in the next video, and I think still enjoy them. I do. And we all know that what you're supposed to enjoy is how you want something done. Next tip I have to prep for sewing the hole shut is doing a little finger press seam, and you just follow the linen line. Oh, I'm going to add one little tip here. Before you press with your iron, before you put this pell on that's fusible on the back of your linen, you want to be at your ironing board with your stitched piece upside down on a terry cloth towel, and have a quilter's measuring cutter, ruler, and you want to line up the linen threads. You can see linen threads, right? They go horizontal and they go vertical. Line those up with the ruler before, and make sure it's laying straight on that terry cloth towel before you press your pell on onto it. Otherwise, you will end up with a skewed, does that make sense if I pull on the corners? A slightly skewed finish. Okay, so that's my major tip on this too. And you probably already know this, but moving on to getting the sawdust in, you just want to press down 1/4 inch seam. So see, that's what that looks like right there. And on the linen side, it's easy to follow and make that straight because you've got those linen threads telling you to do so. Mine still aren't even. I'm off like one little thread here. So when I went to Stitch Etc. back in the end of September, I did this little class just to try to help take the fear out of using sawdust. I've heard a lot of comments about people say it's so messy, it gets everywhere. This is how I keep it from getting everywhere. I used to use, but when we moved, I threw it away. Those big bats of bowls from Tupperware. They work really good too. But I've had this potato cage carrier in my sewing room as my garbage can for years and years and years. So it has become my sawdust catcher instead of the Tupperware. That's a bowl. You could use any bowl, but why not just put it right into the garbage can, right? Any of the overflow. So this is how I store my sawdust in my sewing room. The big bins I told you are in the garage. I keep a gallon-sized Ziploc baggie in my cupboard in the sewing room. And in it, I keep what is this? Probably a 1/4 cup measuring cup in here. Because you don't want to just, go full force, a cup at a time. You put in a little bit at a time. I also keep, and this is for my husband. I don't know where you found this, in the garage or somewhere. He just had one, but it's an oil. It's called the Flow Tool. I believe it's for adding oil to your car through the funnel.
I think they're readily available at most Pep Boys or AutoZone type auto parts stores.
Okay, cool tip. And the best part is because it has such a big hole in the bottom of it. to get the sawdust through. Sawdust is not naturally going to just flow like liquid.
No.
But it's got to be big enough that the larger pieces can also go through. But that's why you also use the chopstick to force it in. And that's why I go with the 2-inch opening. Now you did cut this off.
I was going to say, yeah, that was the original funnel that you buy off the shelf has a long, very tapered funnel tube. So I cut it off to achieve that larger end there.
And you can see the cut.
Yeah, it's not even cut very straight.
Not even cut straight. Doesn't matter. I just needed it to be big enough to get the big chunks.
So that's about what, a 3/4 inch opening roughly?
About, yeah, or an inch.
Maybe an inch?
Maybe an inch.
So somewhere around there's, I assume, ideal.
So now what you want to do is just put that hole at the bottom of the funnel into your hole. And I hold on to it right at the seam. I only put it in there at about 1/4 inch deep. Okay. I don't shove it all the way down in the pillow. It ends about right there. And where you want to just keep your grasp on the funnel is right there at the opening. So just hold it into place, and it's fine if you push it in an inch or 1/2 inch, whatever helps you grip it and keep a hold of it. Okay, so now we're just going to start scooping it in. And because I'm doing it over this garbage can and over the bag, the residual is going to go back in the bag, but if any falls out, it's just going to go in my garbage can. Okay, so let's try to get it so you can see. And this is when I use the fat end. Just force it in there. You can stir it at the bottom of that funnel to try to get it in. You can see I've got stuff kind of flying around. I'm not letting it bug me too much. When I feel like it's full, I usually add about another scoop and push it down, and I'll show you how I push it down with the funnel at the end. And yeah, you can see there's, sawdust is getting on the pillow. All of that comes off. And just work it down there into the pillow. You can see what's going on here, fluffing around. I'm just kind of stirring it, pushing it, poking it to the sides. Okay, and that's doing pretty good. Now I'm going to stop with that for a moment because see how full it's gotten. So far it's probably 2/3 of the way full. Now hold the pillow and push it in with the funnel. And just push it down in there so you've got some progress in the bottom of the pillow. Okay, I'm feeling like I'm just about done here. We'll do two more scoops. Enough to fill those corners. And I'm sure you're all watching this right now saying, well, how does she get it in the corners? Polyester, you got to work it into those corners. Here's the one thing I did not like about polyester. Is you push that into the corners and it just comes right back out. It's like spring-loaded. You get it in. And I just felt like I had to try and work too hard to get it to stay in. But I appreciate a good polyester pillow fill. Meaning, Vonna, she can do one. And they are perfect and they're gorgeous. I don't want to overuse the word perfect, but she does. That's her talent. She's very good at it. So I'm calling them perfect. Okay, so you can see I've just worked down as much as I can. See how fat it is right now? You can see how it's kind of pudging. It's totally fine. Let it pudge. Get it all in there. Okay, I'm happy with what I got. It's pudged and it's full. And you can see the large chunks. So I'm going to push it down in there. I'm going to sew it up as fast as I can. So I've got my needle all ready to go. Always prep your needle first because then you're ready. Just my suggestion. And then I come up through. Now this you're really going to want to zoom in on. So what you want to do is get that knot hidden under one of your folds of your fabric here. So just come in up through. Can you see that? And a couple stitches back from where you had the sewing machine stitches. Does that show okay? Mm-hmm. Okay, so pull that up through. Now I'm right-handed, so I came up through the left, it looks like the left-handed side with my needle and thread. So I'm going to flip it around now and sew with my right hand in the direction I sew. That makes sense. Same as I do cross stitch. So you can put little clips in here if you want. I just find they get in my way. They're just in my way. So I use my fingers and pinch this closed and just start making kind of blind hem stitches. So you're just taking about 1/8 of an inch of the backing and coming up through the fold in the front. And this is where this rubber, sorry if I'm not very smooth, but this is where this rubber thimble comes into play. It is so nice. I need to get some more of these. I think they're called gumdrop thimbles, possibly. So into the backing fabric, and don't go through. You're grabbing that first layer inside. And yes, it might get caught on your corner right there. Just flip it up. And then backing fabric. Can you see that okay, hon? Mm-hmm. And linen. And each time you go down into the fabric and up out of the fabric with your needle, try to put it right in that fold that you pre-made. You pre-folded that before you stuffed the sawdust in. You finger pressed that down. See how fast this is? I have tried the method where you cut the back and stuff through there. I feel like I cannot keep control of the sawdust if I have a cut in the back, because you're trying to disperse it into 4 smaller areas versus 1 big area. If you have those 4 smaller areas, you can't get as much sawdust in if you go this way and have a bigger place to shove it all. So that's just, trial and error. You got to try all these different ways to figure out what works best for you. We're almost done. Now, here's another thing. If I know I'm putting trim on something like this little pillow and my seam's going to be totally covered up, you're never going to see my stitches. I'm not going to try to be super perfect on this. You can see I'm taking a pretty big stitch. If you glue it on or sew it on, it's going to be reinforced. This seam is by whatever trim you put on it. Now, if I'm not putting any trim on it, I'll maybe try to be a little bit more meticulous, but still, can you see my stitches? Is anybody going to turn my pillow upside down and look for them? No. So that's how you hide them. I hope that is satisfactory for you guys. So I've gotten to sometimes when you get to where the machine stitching ends, you get a couple of extra little threads poking out from the machine seam, that double stitching that you did inside. Just take 1 more stitch past that, just so you know you got all the way through it and past it, so there's not a hole. And then I love to knot mine at the end right here, just like Vonna. When I took 4-H sewing, we just went through the loop 1 time, but Vonna does it twice. And I'm not a knot specialist or a Boy Scout, but it seems like it's probably a good idea to me. And it probably makes it into a certain kind of a knot. Sometimes I'll take an extra knot there, just 2 of them. But I'm going to glue trim on this one, so I'm happy with what I did. And then you want to run your thread off somewhere out into the pillow. And can you see that right there? So it's coming out there, and then cut it off, making sure not to cut your fabric. And guess what? It's done. It's stuffed. Now I'm going to just let you sit and watch me manipulate it. You can feel there's kind of some bumps in there, but I love them. And you just squish it and disperse your sawdust in your pillow. Now I had someone ask once too, what if you're doing a rectangle? Here's an example of a rectangle that I'll show in another video for finishes, but it's long. And if you're stuffing through here, I recommend you stuff through the side on these, because if you're going through here, you kind of can't stuff as much. It's just something I've found out. But once you sew it closed, like this one, to really get it dispersed into the corners, you just shake it and you can feel that sawdust move. And it just goes where you want it to. So you shake it even, get a nice, and before I take pictures for my patterns, I flatten them up, and I have found you can get seriously flat, like perfect flat finishes for taking photos with sawdust. So there you go. It doesn't have quite as much in the corner. But seriously, I really don't care. Because look at that. Oh, and then smell them. They smell so good. Now, I did buy some lavender recently from Factory Direct Wholesale, or Factory Direct. A lot of you I know shop there for cute little things for your bowl fillers, and they happen to sell dried lavender in a bag, and I bought some a couple months ago, and I've been throwing it in with my spring and summer finishes, and it smells so good. So all you have to do is, like, you know, you're scooping your sawdust in, and then reach over and get a scoop of lavender. One little scoop will do it. Lavender's very strong. And wow, then you've got some aromatherapy going on. You've got your pine scents, your wood scents, and then you've got your lavender. FYI, I used to work at Young Living, which is an oil, essential oil company. And someone asked me once in the pine, when I talked about doing sawdust stuffing in a past video, if the oils came out into the pillow from the pine wood. Fact, the oil's not in the pine. Pine might have gum in it, but that really is in the bark. It's on the outside, and any mill is not going to use or have any of that because they take the bark off first and they're using the wood that's on the inside. I'm not worried about that. I have very clean wood experience with my guy, but the oil is in the needles. So when they make the essential oils, they're using the needles. They do the, what's that process? You came up with it the other night. Rendering. They put it in all the needles in a huge vat, steam them, all the oils are then released and come out, and they can then process them, and we get to use them as essential oils in our lives. So the wood sawdust does not have the oil in it, just the needles, but it still smells really good. If you could find a wood guy that had cedar, that'd be really cool too. But I mean, look how square and fun that came out, and flat. So there you go. And you don't even have to like have a cow over the pillow at the moment. It's just the cleanliness of how to use that sawdust and get it in there. That's how I do it anyway. So hope you like this little video tutorial. It's my first tutorial. Probably will be my last. Anyway, happy sawdust stuffing FlossTube. Bye-bye.